Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another really interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the TwoSun knives TS223. This is a super interesting and super compelling knife that was generously lent to me by Neves Knives. If you guys have never checked out Neves Knives, they are a fantastic channel. I've been following them for a long time, and you guys have probably heard me talk about them. If you're not subscribed, stop this review, go over to their channel. I'll leave a link down in the description. Subscribe to them and come back. I promise I'll still be here. Thank you so much for sending this guy along. They also sent another TwoSun knife. Also, real quick here before we get started, thank you so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. Literally, without you, I would not be able to do this. So if you'd like to check out my Patreon and support the channel, you can find a link down in the description. The support would mean the world to me. So this is one of very few, TwoSun knives that I have handled. But after a couple of them, I directed a lot. By the way, there'll be a direct link for this knife down in the description. You can pick this up for yourself. There's also an entire category in my Amazon store for TwoSun knives. And the reason that I dedicate an entire category is after I handled a couple of them and got some information on the materials, made sure everything was legitimate, because their prices are kind of insane in a good way. So I was like, okay, something's got to be off. I need to know if these materials are real. These are made in China, but fit and finish was excellent. I needed to know it was the real deal. So after confirming that, I thought, oh my goodness, these are super popular and they seem to be the real deal. So I started looking through their models and checking everything out. I saw a picture of this and I said, goodness, that is really good looking. And I kind of bookmarked that one this one in my head. And then I found a whole bunch of other ones that I was more or less interested in the design, but the materials that they were using, I was like, hey, yeah, thumbs up. They kind of have like a ultra budget line, right? Sub $50 line. Then they've got like some D2 and some similar steels mixed with titanium and carbon fiber around the mid-range, around the $100 mark. And then they have some premium knives with the same sort of carbon fiber or titanium. And then they go up to S35VN and M390 in some cases around the $150 to $170 mark, which is crazy. That's crazy. I've never seen prices like that associated with those types of materials. But anyways, they had a lot of interesting designs, nothing that super caught my eye until I rolled across this guy. And when I found out Neves Knives had this, I said, hey, when you guys are done with that, I would really like to take a look at that because it looks like my cup of tea. So now having it in hand, after, Jared and Kara Neve, they gave me the go-ahead to carry it and use it. I've spent a lot of time with this guy, even though I've been stuck at home, and I definitely have gathered my thoughts on it. I'm excited to share them with you guys. Let's go ahead and get an overall measurement. This is a full-size knife coming in at exactly 8¼ inches. The blade length is about 3.6 inches overall, and the cutting edge is exactly 3.5. That is my sweet spot. I'm biased towards those measurements. This is the size of knife that I prefer to carry. I think that is excellent. If you live somewhere where you can't carry a big knife, right, because of legalities, or you just don't like big knives, and that might have killed it for you right there. But if you are a fan of full-size knives, you might really like this one. Up against the Ontario Rat Model 1, you can see the Rat 1 coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall, just a little bit longer. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in slightly shorter, but good handle and blade comparison. These are similar in overall blade length, overall handle length, handle shape, blade design, kind of. I mean, this is fully flat ground. This has got a flat, right? I mean, there's a lot of similarities there. So Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall, a little bit shorter. And then last but not least, we have the Spyderco Para 3. Para 3 coming in at 7¼ inches overall. So how's the action on this guy? Like other TwoSuns, the action is really, really good. It's not completely fall shut, but it is nice and smooth on the inside there, and it is running on bearings. The detent is probably the part that makes it shine. This knife will flip readily. It is solid on lockout, and it is also solid right here. On some of these less, when I say less expensive, I mean like for what I would assume this knife would cost, it's substantially under that mark, like shockingly under that mark, which we'll get to. But I always check for little things like, you know, blade play, up and down blade play. I look for excess rattle around here. I look for things like a detent ball ramp, which actually, truthfully, this does not have, but that's a, wait, no, guys, I'm wrong. I'm sorry, that was the lock bar. I was like, I could have sworn this had a detent ball ramp. It actually does have a detent ball ramp right there. That's excellent. And then detent lash. Truthfully, detent lash a little bit, even though it's one of my biggest pet peeves. After, you know, below a certain price point, I kind of let it slide. This thing has no detent lash. And what I mean by that is once it's secure right here, and you wiggle the flipper tab or you kind of wiggle on the blade, it does not move. Left, right, up, down. It doesn't move until it breaks that detent. And that to me is much more important. Solid lockup and then, you know, solid on the closure is much more important than having a completely false shut action. But the thing is, if I were to grade the action just, you know, on false shuttiness, I'd still give it about an 8.5 out of 10. It's really, really impressive to have all of those things together. Excuse me, I'm going to get my fingerprints off of here. Next up, let's talk about carry profile. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on blade thickness while we're at it. Not a thin blade, but we'll talk about that here in a sec. Sorry. Overall thickness of the blade coming in at about 150 thousandths. Keep in mind, this is a fully flat ground blade with a lot of room to drop towards the cutting edge. Sorry, we've got a very shiny blade there. A lot of reflectivity. We have contoured titanium bolsters, real titanium bolsters, and then we have carbon fiber scales. You can see the bolster is actually part of the frame, and then the scales are the carbon fiber sitting on top of it there. Really, really nice looking. Now, the inside of the titanium is not milled out. Let's go ahead and weigh it. Weight on this TwoSun TS223 coming in at, honestly, a completely understandable 4.66 ounces. I mean, to put that in contrast here, the Ritter Hogue weighs almost exactly the same, and it's G10 and a little steel cartridge liner. So we're looking at carbon fiber, titanium, and a 150,000 stock thick blade. And we're coming in basically the exact same weight for a little bit bigger of a knife with a little bit more cutting edge. That's honestly very, very impressive to me. So carry profile, we have a sort of medium-sized flipper tab. It's not sticking out too far. It's not huge. It's not super tiny. But it is essentially just kind of taking up the same amount of room in the pocket as the Ritter Hogue. So it's a little bit shorter. Whoops. A little bit shorter than both the PM2 and Para 3. Not nearly as tall. It does have a flipper tab. It's definitely a little bit heavier, a little bit longer than the Para 3. And then in terms of overall thickness, this is a little thicker, but again, the scales are contoured. I will always take a little bit of excess thickness if I get some hand-filling contouring there. So same kind of thing going on with the Ritter Hogue. It's a little thicker still than the Ritter Hogue, but again, the contouring feels nice, and it gives you that quality feeling of, you know, the item filling out your hand and feeling like it was actually made for your hand rather than this odd geometric shape that can be held by your hand. Anyways, what's the next thing? Oh yeah, let's do the hardware check. Get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, two items that are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them down in the Amazon store that I reference at the beginning of every video. Just pull open the store and look for knife maintenance. You should find them pretty easily. So I can tell you guys just by looking at this knife, pretty sure all of the body hardware is T8. Let's check. Yes, T8. T8, T8. How about the pocket clip screw? T8. Oh, we're going to have T6 on these guys, but you shouldn't be taking that out anyway. So I'll give that one a pass. And T8 on the pivot. Thank you. Thank you, TwoSun. I mean, come on. Like, these companies are all figuring this out. It just makes me cringe every time I run into a knife with T6, but thank you very much, TwoSun, for not going the evil T6 route. That makes this much, much easier to disassemble. So that's awesome. All right, so I think we've covered everything there. Let's go ahead and talk about the materials and the anatomy. We have micro-milled, perfectly fitted titanium bolsters. Now this is TC4 titanium, and for a long time, I remember being on the forums years ago and seeing TC4 on websites that shall not be named because they were associated with clones, and the clones were always made out of TC4. And so in my mind, there was a negative stigma attached to TC4, and it had to be, you know, titanium that was not the same grade as the beloved 6AL4V from America, right? Actually, as it turns out, I was completely wrong about that for a long time. TC4, what they list as grade 2 titanium in China, is exactly the same as our 6AL4V or grade 5 titanium. And I confirm this with a lot of people in the community who know a lot more than I do. So that is my, you know, official, you know, that's what I'm saying officially now, is that there's enough information out there for me to confirm this and say, yeah, don't be afraid of TC4 as long as it's being listed as TC4 from a reputable, you know, dealer or whatever. TC4 is the same thing as our grade 5 titanium. Anyways, this looks great, and so does the show side pivot. In fact, the fitment of everything, even this line here, truthfully, between the titanium and the carbon fiber, if it weren't for this little line right here, this little cut into the carbon fiber that was so, you know, right after the line on the bolster, I would not know where one ended and one began. I mean, the fitment on this is really, really good. The carbon fiber is real. It is not a laminate. It looks really, really nice. I'm a big fan of it. I'm also a big fan of how the hardware looks. I mean, it's really, really nice. The blade is satin finished and sort of has that rainbow iridescence that you get with a belt satin finish. It is 14C28N. That's a Sandvik stainless steel, one that is actually one of few steels out there that are actually made specifically for folding knives. You see them a lot on, you see that steel on a lot of Kershaw knives, kind of around the same price point. It is a very good, very well-rounded steel, not a powder steel. It's an ingot form steel, but it's one kind of like 154 cm, where the grain structure is very, very fine, especially when the heat treat gets, you know, or well, the edge retention that is a product of a fine grain structure with the composition of this steel is further emphasized by proper heat treatment, which according to Z Knives can get up as high as 62 before you start having diminishing returns or actually going backwards in some places, which is the case with steel in general. It seems like this steel is supposed to be hardened to, you know, for, I mean, optimum, somewhere around 60. It's a lot of steels that are out there, but you're going to have similar edge retention, similar toughness, similar ease of sharpening, similar corrosion resistance to 154 cm. I'm not sure exactly what is higher or lower, but my point is it's very, very well-rounded, and the composition was designed on purpose to be very well-rounded, designed for a knife that's going to be used for a whole bunch of different things. The steel is incredibly appropriate at this price range, and it's welcome on a design like this because it feels, along with other elements, like it's really meant to be used, which is cool because it looks nice too. This is a fully flat ground drop point blade with an enormous amount of belly. Keep in mind, 3.5 inches of pure cutting edge. We have a nice sharpening trail here and absolutely nothing in the cutting path. All of these edges up here are nicely rounded off. There's nothing that makes me feel like it was, you know, just sort of glossed over and that they didn't care. I mean, no, they absolutely cared about this knife. And take a look at the final cutting bevel. It's even all the way down. Sorry, we're getting blurry there. The final cutting bevel is completely even all the way down and on both sides. The blade is perfectly symmetrical. It's a very, very good looking and purposeful blade. You can see we've got the TwoSun logo right up here, and then on the back it says Jelly Jerry Design. I do not know who that is, but there you go. I mean, I wish that I had more information there on the designer for you, but I don't. The flipper tab, it's a little bit pokey right here and here, but you can see that they did try to knock it down a little bit. I don't think the jimping needed to be there. It's going to catch you a little bit if you're right up, you know, choking up as far as you possibly can and you're working without gloves, which is, you know, this is the type of knife where you really can get the material right behind the edge. It doesn't need a forward choil because you're already so close, right? So if you're going to be gripping it like that, you're going to be running into the points on the flipper tab and into that jimping a little bit right there. It's not that big of a deal. It's just something to keep in mind. All corners and edges all the way around here are nicely knocked down until we get to the carbon fiber. The carbon fiber is a little bit angular, not that bad. Again, it's something you're really only going to notice if you're using it for long periods of time. I do like the lines on the inside of the carbon fiber offering real traction on an otherwise very slippery surface. The contouring of this knife really fills the hand. It's just excellent. And on top of that, again, this is a good looking knife. You know, there's something to be said about the combination of a knife that feels good and looks good, right? It culminates into a much more enjoyable experience than just one or the other. So I'm really impressed by that. The stops are garaged. Check this out. Garage stops, what that means is both in the open and closed position, they're completely hidden, but they operate the same as external stops, or as I used to call them, bracing lugs, meaning they actually rest on both sides of the frame and help to mitigate pressure away from the pivot in a situation where you're using the knife in a non-knife scenario, right? Which you shouldn't do anyway, but it does help. Better than a stop pin, because a stop pin is just fixed, it's a peg, and then the blade is resting on the stop pin. Rather, the stop pin is attached to the blade in this case, and if force is applied on the left or right side of the blade, a lot of that force is mitigated away from the pivot. Well, on a stop pin, or a design where the blade is resting on the stop pin, that kind of force on the blade is going to go right to the pivot, which is a critical part of the knife, right? Either way, you shouldn't be doing anything other than cutting with your knife, but in my opinion, that's a better design. Moving down here, like I said, a couple of little sharp corners right here, where the carbon fiber is. They could have knocked that down just a little bit more. You can see there, they did it on the titanium, and then they got to the carbon fiber, and they're like, nah, not that big of a deal. Love the backspacer. Would have loved the gear pattern, but that's just me. The backspacer itself is great. It's made out of titanium, and that's nice. Pocket clip is also wonderful. The pocket clip is titanium, and it is contoured. It's a little teeny tiny bit sharp right there, but not that big of a deal. It does sort of have that tooth that I always talk about not liking, but the truth is this particular one in and out of my pocket must be just rounded enough under there that it doesn't have a problem getting over pant material. So like the sweatpants I'm wearing right now, athletic shorts, though I wouldn't recommend an athletic shorts or sweatpants, just fine. Jeans going to be fine. Thin pant material, it's going to be fine. It'll get in there. This is a big knife though. This is more of a jeans knife, but you can do whatever you want with it if you buy it. It does have a steel lock bar insert, and we have a sort of bolster lock, which is super cool. You can put your fingers wherever you want down here, and it won't affect the lock bar. On a frame lock design right here, you can see the entire frame lock is exposed, so if I put my fingers in the wrong place, it makes it much harder to open. But in this case, no, my fingers naturally rest right here, and my index finger's not down there because it's on top of the flipper tab, so nothing is affected by it, and that's really, really nice. Steel lock bar insert on the inside, doubling as the actual over travel stop. That's great. Knife locks up naturally at something like 30%, and despite the Neves having used it, it's still locking up perfectly center. Like I said, seriously, no blade play. Up, down, I mean like really wrenching on it. No blade play, up, down, left, or right. That's really impressive, because most knives, if I really try to wrench on it, I can force it. And I'm telling you guys, honestly, I can't force that, and it's nice and smooth. I mean, forced blade play. It's great. So, again, what don't I like about this knife? The flipper tab is a little bit pokey. There's jimping on the top that doesn't really need to be there, but it flips just fine, both in push button and more so light switch is really what it's made to do. The carbon fiber right here is a little bit angular. It's not terrible. It's just a little angular. Could have been knocked down a little bit. And the pocket clip has a little bit of a pokey situation going on there. For some people, it's just going to be too big. It's not going to be legal in a lot of areas, but that's just for some people, use your best judgment. But yeah, so all I have for this knife are nitpicks. Now, let me tell you the best part. It depends on when you're watching this video, and depends on maybe where you're buying it, right? But taking a look, at prices on this knife, they're higher or lower in some places, but a lot of the places where I'm finding this knife are listing it at around $100. Around $100, you are getting what I'm hoping is properly heat treated. I have no reason to believe that it's not. What I'm hoping is properly heat treated 14C28N, which is a Sandvik fine grain ingot steel that was meant for folding knives. You're getting a fully flat ground blade that is both utilitarian in terms of strength and geometrically and in terms of the composition, and it does get, of course, nice and thin behind the edge, really thin behind the edge. Actually, we didn't talk about that. Take a look at that there. Not a grape skinner, but it's definitely going to be more slicey than a lot of your blades. You're going to get milled, contoured titanium bolsters, real carbon fiber, action that is pretty synonymous with your typical $200 to $300 knife nowadays. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of Wii knives that feel exactly the same as this. and you're getting a titanium pocket clip, titanium backspacer, this beautiful look. Honestly, I mean, these are materials that would normally throw a knife into a much higher price range. This is a deal. This is hands down one of the best deals on a folding knife that I have ever seen. Now, this knife is made in China, but even still, I'm telling you, based on what TwoSun has been doing with titanium, carbon fiber, and M390, it won't surprise me if they do, well, if they did do this knife in M390, it would still only be a $150 to $170 knife. But listen, I will take this knife all day with Sandvik 14C28N at $100. I'm not kidding when I say that this is one of the best deals out there. This knife has so many good features that are executed so well. I just can't, this is a knife that I can so easily recommend to people. I mean, talk about something that will set a bar, like a newcomer coming onto the scene. They're like, hey, listen, I just want a really good knife. I'm happy spending about $100. If they don't mind that the knife is going to be, you know, that the knife's made in China, which some people, I can totally get that. You're like, no, I don't want anything from China. No, that's totally fine. This knife does not say China anywhere on it, by the way. And it's not a clone of anything. It's an original design. So somebody's like, yeah, I just want a really good knife. Talk about a bar that will be set for that person that probably won't be passed up until like the $300, $400, $500 mark, truthfully. And even then, there's a lot of knives at that price point that aren't as good as this. This is incredible. And I mean that. And I'm a little under the weather, so I'm probably not emphasizing this as thoroughly and excessively as I normally would, but understand that this is one of the most incredible knives, dollar for dollar, that I have ever had on this table. I am so pleased by this, and it's so nice to know that a design that looks pretty in pictures is just as functional, if not more functional and more well put together than I ever could have hoped for. Neves Knives, thank you so much for letting me experience this. This was awesome. Check this knife out. Use my link in the description. That's going to be pretty much it for today's review, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this metal complex logo right here. Turn your notifications on and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.